Not a single network wanted to make Stranger Things, and their reason why is so dumb. Stranger Things' final season starts this week, so here are some things I bet you never knew about its origins. The story behind Stranger Things starts in the 1980s with two significant events. One, Steven Spielberg made fantasy films with kid heroes like E.T. and the Goonies, and twin brothers Matt and Ross Duffer were born in Durham, North Carolina in 1984. The Duffers grew up obsessed with movies, and in the third grade, their parents got them a Hi8 video camera to make their own films. The Duffers were rejected from NYU Film School and USC, so they went to Chapman University, and they graduated in 2007 and started making short films and writing screenplays. Their spec script origin got them an agent, and then in 2015 they made their first feature, Hidden, a Shyamalan-esque post-apocalyptic horror film starring Alexander Skarsgård and Andrea Riseborough. Warner Brothers acquired the 78-minute movie, but due to changes at the studio, it was only released in a few theaters, grossing just $310,000. Which was a setback for sure, but TV producer Donald DeLine had read Hidden's script and was impressed, so he hired the Duffers as writer-producers on Fox's new mystery sci-fi series Wayward Pines, which was directed and executive produced by M. Night Shyamalan. Shyamalan offered the Duffers mentorship on how to make a TV show, and with that experience under their belts, they got to work on Stranger Things. The Duffers had first started thinking about some of the show's elements as early as 2010, which will be a very important thing to remember later. Anyway, in 2013, the Duffers were really inspired by the movie Prisoners and wondered if you could expand a missing kid story over 8 episodes. Then they had the idea of a monster that could consume humans, and combining these two premises gave them the spark of inspiration. When considering the monster's origins, they thought about bizarre Cold War experiments, which grounded the story in science and led them to the 1980s setting, which of course allowed them to incorporate their influences like Steven Spielberg, Stephen King, John Carpenter, James Cameron, and more. They were also inspired by anime like Akira and Elfenlied, and video games Silent Hill, Dark Souls, and The Last of Us. Their show wasn't called Stranger Things at first, it was called Montauk. Here was their original pitch. Montauk is an 8-hour sci-fi horror epic. Set in Long Island in 1980 and inspired by the supernatural classics of that era, we explore the crossroads where the ordinary meet the extraordinary. Emotional, cinematic, and rooted in character, Montauk is a love letter to the golden age of Steven Spielberg and Stephen King, a marriage of human drama and supernatural fear. Montauk, the town on the most eastern tip of Long Island, is the center of many real-world conspiracy theories involving secret government experiments. They wrote a pilot script and a 20-page pitch book that included reference images, footage, and music from the classic movies that inspired them. And then they started pitching Montauk around Hollywood, but nobody wanted to make the show. 15 cable networks turned them down, saying that a show with children leads just wouldn't work, and it either needed to be a kids show or it should be focused on Hopper. But director Sean Levy and his producing partner Dan Cohen saw its potential. They bought the rights to the series and gave the Duffers full creative control, though Sean Levy would eventually direct several episodes. Together they were able to then sell the show to Netflix, who was just starting to put out popular originals like House of Cards and Orange is the New Black. Though it should be noted that those shows were made by outside studios and then sold to Netflix, where Stranger Things would become Netflix's first original hit that it produced in-house. Because Netflix was new to the originals game, it was willing to take a risk on fresh talent. And ending up at Netflix over a cable or broadcast network was probably for the best anyway, because the Duffers believed their premise wouldn't have worked across a longer season. They wanted their 8-episode show to feel like a big movie. Once the show was at Netflix, they decided to change its setting to Hawkins, a fictional suburban town in Indiana, because it allowed them more creative freedom compared to a real place. The Duffers felt like outcasts in high school, which they used to inform the boys and Barb. Joyce was inspired by Richard Dreyfuss's character Roy in Close Encounters, because she appears, quote, absolutely bonkers to everyone in the town. They also needed a new title, so they brainstormed off of Stephen King's Firestarter cover. And after lots of discussion, they landed on Stranger Things, as it evoked King's Needful Things, as well as the phrase, Stranger Things have happened. Then it came time to cast the show. Casting director Carmen Cuba suggested Winona Ryder for Joyce, and the Duffers loved it because of her 1980s film work. Ryder agreed to join the show, but had one condition for the brothers. She and Tim Burton had been discussing a Beetlejuice sequel for years, and if it ever materialized, the Duffers would have to give her time off to go shoot it. And this did end up happening with Beetlejuice in 2024. The show went on to cast a number of actors from big 80s movies, including Sean Astin, Paul Reiser, Cary Elwes, Robert Englund, Matthew Modine, and Linda Hamilton. The Duffers had been aware of David Harbour for a while and felt that he had waited too long to get a leading role on a show. For the kid roles, the brothers auditioned about 1,000 children, and fittingly, they had the kids read lines from Stand By Me. Because they knew how intense the material and production would be, they intentionally sought out kids with prior acting experience. Before she auditioned for Stranger Things, a 10-year-old Millie Bobby Brown was ready to quit acting. A big LA casting director had just told her she'd never get hired because she was too mature. But her parents encouraged her to do one last audition, and she picked Stranger Things because it sounded cool. The team was blown away by her poise, and despite her having an English accent, she did every audition, including her Skype meeting with the Duffers, with an American accent. Brown was 11 years old when she played 11. At 13, Finn Wolfhard was already a big film buff and impressed the Duffers with his knowledge of 80s movies. And the brothers were blown away by Peyton Matazzaro's authentic audition tape. They cast him as Dustin after watching his tape only one time. For Will, they were impressed with Noah Schnapp's blend of innocence and charisma. Joe Keery's Steve was supposed to die in the first season, but the Duffers loved Joe so much they kept the character around. The brothers wanted to use as much practical effects as possible to evoke the 1980s, and so the special effects team developed a Demogorgon animatronic for season 1. But with a tight production schedule, just 6 months to do 8 episodes, they had to sacrifice some practical effects for digital. Netflix set the season 1 budget at $48 million, which is about $6 million an episode. Season 5, by the way, cost about 10 times as much. It had a reported budget of $400 to $480 million. Anyway, filming began on season 1 in November of 2015. At first, the Duffers wanted to shoot on Long Island, because of Montauk, but the cold weather that time of year prevented it, so they shot the first season in the Atlanta area, which reminded them of their hometown in North Carolina. Jackson, Georgia served as the main locations for Hawkins. They also shot on location in places like the Georgia Mental Health Institute, Bellwood Quarry, Patrick Henry High School in Stockbridge, Emory University's Continuing Education Department, and the former City Hall in Douglasville, Georgia. Much of the first season was also filmed on sets at Screen Gem Studios in Atlanta. Stranger Things, of course, has a lot of visual effects. For example, they shoot the show on digital, but add film grain in post to make it look like it was shot in the 80s. In season 1, the monster bursting through the wall was done with CGI. The show's title sequence was directly inspired by 1980s TV and book covers, specifically Richard Greenberg's title work at RGA, including Altered States and The Dead Zone. They also got input from Dan Perry, who worked on film title credits in the 1980s. The Stranger Things font is ITC Benguat, created by Ed Benguat in 1979, and it's the same exact font that Stephen King used on many of his 1980s novels. Michael Stein and Kyle Dixon of the electronic band Survive composed the show's music and theme song. They used a lot of synth to evoke 80s artists like Tangerine Dream and John Carpenter. The show also features period-accurate needle drops, and some of its songs have had big resurgences on the charts. Season 1 premiered on Netflix July 15th, 2016, and it was successful, but not yet the phenomenon it would later become. 14 million people in the 18 to 49 demo watched the first season in its first 35 days, which made it the third biggest Netflix original at the time. And the show had remarkable retention. 70% of viewers that watched the second episode ended up finishing the entire season. Critics loved it. 97% of the 92 reviews assessed by Rotten Tomatoes for season 1 were positive, and Metacritic has season 1 at 76. In 2016, The Guardian and Empire named it the third best TV show of the year. Stranger Things has been nominated for 57 Emmys over the years, winning 12 total, including acting nods for Shannon Purser, David Harbour, and Millie Bobby Brown. The show's entire ensemble won the SAG Award for Best Drama in 2018, and the series won a Peabody in 2019. But also in 2019, filmmaker Charlie Kessler sued the Duffer Brothers, claiming they stole the idea for Stranger Things from his 2012 short Montauk, which included a missing boy, a mysterious military base, and a monster from another dimension. Kessler claimed he pitched a feature based on the short to the Duffers at the Tribeca Film Festival in 2014, but the Duffers' lawyer said they never saw this short, nor did they ever meet with him. And as I mentioned earlier, the Duffers started creating Stranger Things as early as 2010, so ultimately Kessler dropped the lawsuit. Over its 9-year run, Stranger Things grew into a global phenomenon, becoming Netflix's first full-blown gigantic franchise based purely on original IP. Viewership grew exponentially with every season. Stranger Things 4 was the third most watched English-language season of TV in Netflix's history, reaching 140.7 million views in its first 91 days. So naturally, there have been tie-ins and homages across the media landscape, including numerous books, comics, and video games. There is a scripted podcast spin-off. The Simpsons did a Treehouse of Horror parody in 2019, and Netflix has opened Stranger Things stores and in-person experiences worldwide. It also launched a prequel play for Shadow on Broadway and in London. And in 2026, an animated spin-off, Tales from 85, is coming to Netflix, and there have been rumors of another live-action spin-off series as well. And to cap it all off, Netflix is showing the Stranger Things finale in select movie theaters on New Year's Eve. Thanks for watching this video. If you've made it to the end, write "Friends Don't Lie" in the comments. For more movie and TV histories, check out the attached playlist, and subscribe to my newsletter for the latest pop culture news.